Shavua Tov, Mishnah Yomi is kicking off this week of learning in Chapter 3 of Bava Metzia, Mishnah Zayin, Hamafkid, Peirot, Etzel, Chavero. Now that sounds a lot like Mishnah Vav, but in this case, the Gemara explains we're going to see is different. In the previous case, someone deposited some Peirot and they were put by themselves in a corner, not mixed in with the custodian's own produce. Now in this case, in Zayin, he had permission to mix them in. You know, he had like a big barrel, a big vat of wine. Okay, you come pour my wine in. Okay, that's the next mission. I'm getting ahead of myself. He had a big bin or a big jug. He said, yeah, throw it in my barrel. We'll put it all together. And the real owner agreed to do that. So he deposited with his friend. It was mixed in with his friend's stuff. Hareze yotzi lo chesronot. The friend can deduct the natural expected decrease when he returns the produce. As we mentioned yesterday, sometimes things, get a little moldy, or the mice come and they nibble on the corners. A little bit naturally gets lost when produce is stored. The Mishnah explains the standard deductions. Lechitin, le'orez, for wheat, and orez is usually translated as rice. There's a discussion in the Rishonim, and of course in modern Ivrit, orez is indeed rice. Tisha chotzei kabin lekor, 9 half kav per core deposited. The Kahati explains it works out to about 2.5%. Lisurin, ledochan, if it's barley and millet, tisha kabin lakor, 9 kav per each core. And a core is 180 kav, so it's about 1/20th, about 5%. Lekusmin, lezera pishtan, shalosh say in the core. But spelt and flax seeds, these apparently get lost very easily. The deduction is 3 seya, that's 18 kav per core, per 180 kav, so 10%. But hakol lefi amida, hakol lefi hazman. But it all depends on the quantity, and it depends on the time. These standard deductions are for an entire year, but we understand maybe during the summer, the rainy season, there's more rotting and more loss than during the dry season. And of course, since it's Elul and almost Rosh Hashanah, hakol lefi amida, hakol lefi hazman, everything is according to your midah, your measurements, also your midot, your character traits. And according to the Zman, it's now the time of tshuva. So it's time to arouse our midot of compassion, having compassion on ourselves, that we can do tshuva and return to Hashem. It's the perfect time to do it. Anyway, the Mishnah goes on, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri adds, Ki ma ichpat lahen achbarim. What do the mice care how much there is? The Mishnah just said it depends on the amount, the total amount. Hello, ochlot bein meharbe, bein mekima. Don't they eat the same, whether there's a lot of food in storage or a little bit of food in storage? I mean, the mice don't get bigger stomachs, just because there's more stuff available. And that might be another practical lesson for us when we're at a kiddush and we see it's very fancy, there's a lot of tasty desserts and treats. Maybe our stomachs shouldn't get bigger. We could learn a thing from the mice. Anyway, his opinion is, Ela eino motzi lo chesronot ele kor achad bilvad. So we only decrease 1 core, even if the depositor had deposited 50 or 500 core, would only decrease 1, because the assumption is the loss and what the mice eat is always constant. And then Mepharshim there's a Yerushalmi. It's the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud says, if there's a lot of food available, then the mice find out, other mice find out. I don't know if the mice communicate, I'm not an expert, if they can communicate, or perhaps the mice smell some delicious food on the face of their fellow mouse and figure out, sniff out where they got it. They have a very sensitive sense of smell that Hashem gave them, so they could be able to cause losses in our produce. Rabbi Yehuda has a third opinion here. Im haita mida meruba, if it was a very large amount, eino motzi lo chesronot. So then the shomer does not have to deduct anything. Now this only applies if he got it in the summer when it's dry, and he returns it in the fall and the winter when it's more humid out. Mibnei shemotirot, because it actually gets bigger because of the humidity and the moisture around. It actually swells up a little bit if we're talking about, dry grains and rice like the Mishnah mentioned. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the amount that's lost by being nibbled by mice is actually gained back because he's returning the items in the humid, rainy season. Now on to Mishnah Het, the 8th Mishnah applies this same concept to wine and oil. Yotzi lo shtut lo yayin. With wine, if he's deposited wine and he's mixed it in with his vats of the owner, of the custodian, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Chomish, he says 1/5 can be deducted. Now we're talking about a new clay container which absorbs a lot of the wine. Now, what about oil? Yotzi lo shloshet lugin shemen lemea. The shomer, when he's returning it, deducts 3 log of oil for every 100 log, so 3%. Log metzia shemarim, because it's 1.5 log of shemarim, of sediment. What settles out, it was floating, the schmutz that was floating in the oil, as it sits there, settles to the bottom, so then when he pours from the jug, he's pouring off the top, and the schmutz stays on the bottom. Log metzia bila, and 1.5 log gets absorbed into the walls of the container. But because we factor in the sediment, the schmutz, the Mishnah explains, Im haya shemen mezukak, if he had deposited pure, clean oil without any sediment, eino motzi lo shemarim, then when he returns it, he cannot make any deduction for what settles out. Im haya kankanim yishonim, and if there are old containers that are already full, the walls of the containers have already absorbed what they're going to absorb, eino motzi lo bella. He can't deduct anything for what's absorbed into the wall of the container. This word kankanim, which is probably related to kan, cans, we might recognize from Hanukkah. When we talk about Alanisim on Hanukkah, we say notar kankanim. So apparently they used kankanim to store oil. The Mishnah concludes, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Afamocher shemen mezukak lachavero kol yemot hashana. Even a merchant who's selling pure oil to the customer for the entire year. So the customer might pay him one large amount, and then every time he needs oil, he'll go to the makolet, he'll go to the store, and the guy will pour off from the jug of oil some oil into the container of the customer. Now, when he bought the oil, there was sediment, there was schmutz floating in the oil, and throughout the year it settles down to the bottom. So every time he's getting a new batch of oil, he's getting pure oil instead of one mixed with sediment. So hareze mekabel olav logi mechetz shmarim lemeya. So the customer needs to understand that there's going to be a deduction. He paid for 100 log, but he's really getting 98.5 log, because every time he gets a new batch, he's getting the pure oil from the top, not oil mixed with sediment. Shavua tov and sei gesund.